Hi, I'm Daniel from Your Right Cosplay, and in this video, I'll show you how I turned a sheet of EVA foam into the assault rifle from Halo 3. Hi, welcome back to another video in the series of me making my Master Chief armor. In this video, I'll show you how the steps I took to make this bad boy right here, the assault rifle from Halo 3. Building this was really cool for me because it was the first time that I used blueprints that I made myself. There wasn't an established pattern that I used or a template. I made it myself through Inkscape and printing out blueprints like this and tracing onto EVA foam. I'll make the blueprints available for you if you want to follow along and do it yourself. With that being said, let's get started. The first step in this process was to import an image of the assault rifle into a program called Inkscape. Once it was there, I was able to trace over it to create a blueprint. I'll be using these lines as guides to cut out the pattern and copy it to the EVA foam as we layer up the different pieces of the assault rifle. Now print out the template into several different pieces of paper that you will have to tape together before you cut out. This is the base template for the assault rifle. Boom! Now that it's cut out, we'll transfer it to some 10mm EVA foam. I like to use HD foam, but you can use whatever type of EVA foam you have on hand. And for the first template that you trace, you want to keep in this trigger, but for the other two, cut it out of your template before you trace it onto the foam. Once the template is traced, it's time to cut it out. You can use a utility knife like here, or an X-Acto knife, or sometimes I use a bandsaw to cut out big pieces of foam, whatever you have on hand and you like to use. To glue these pieces together, I like to use barge contact cement, but any contact cement will work, or if you want to use hot glue as well, that works. I don't like hot glue as much because contact cement is just so much better. But if you don't have contact cement, just use hot glue to glue these three pieces together, making sure that the trigger piece, the piece that has the trigger, is in the middle. When using contact cement, first always use a respirator. You only have one set of lungs, so you want to make sure you protect them because this contact cement is pretty nasty. You spread the contact cement over each piece, a thin layer over each piece that you want to stick together, and then let it dry for about 10 minutes or until the contact cement is tacky. Then it would be time to put the two pieces together. When gluing these three pieces together, they're not going to line up exactly right. That's just the nature of cutting them out using manual tools. But you want to get them as close as possible, and we'll go back and clean them up with a rotary tool towards the end of this project. You'll want to get the back piece, what I'm working on here, closest than the front. The front you will be covered up later, so it won't make as big of a difference, but you want to get the back side, the butt end of the gun, as close as possible. The next step is to separate this template into three separate pieces that we will use to mark where a lot of the details will go on the assault rifle. We'll also use part of this template to create those details. Make sure you also remove this grip part as well. We won't need it anymore. Once the templates are separated, I put this piece back on our build, and this will mark where a lot of those small details will go on the assault rifle. Then again, put the butt piece back on and mark along this line here. Include the grip. Make sure you make these markings on both sides of the template. The next step is to separate this piece into 4 separate pieces that we will use to make the details in the middle. Here are what all these 4 pieces should look like once they've been cut out. Now take these pieces you just cut out and transfer them over to some 2mm EVA foam. We'll use 2mm for all the detail pieces. And then cut them out. Here are all the pieces that have been cut out successfully, including an extra piece that you see, the big blank one towards the bottom. Yeah, that one, yeah. That one will go under that one when we put them all together. Just like that. Yep, good job. Now let's glue those details into place. For small details using small foam like 2mm, I like to use super glue instead of contact cement. I find it's easier to work with. I'm gluing these in this order that you can see in the video. When putting on these details, I'm just lining them up with the lines that we created in the previous steps. It's an easy way to make sure they're in the right place. The last piece goes on top of the extra piece we put on there, so it's a little bit more raised. As you know, you can't see here. Move your shoulder, man. Move your shoulder, please. There we go. Okay. Make sure you also do this on the other side as well, flipped. Next, we'll use a 15mm dowel here and line it up with the big black line on the template piece and cut it to size. And we'll do the same for the big black line on the end piece. Then cut these pieces down the center to make them into half dowels. Put the template back on and mark where we will glue down these half dowels and glue them into place, lining them up with the marks you just created. Do the same for the back piece. These pieces will create humps once we put other pieces of foam over them. And of course, do the same on the other side. Now it's time to turn our attention to these pieces that we have printed and cut out. Notice that when we cut these out of foam eventually, we'll need to cut along these lines right here at 45 degrees. And we'll trace this onto 10mm foam as well. When cutting these lines at 45 degrees, make sure your knife is really sharp. Otherwise, it'll come out looking kind of funky. Now that these pieces have been cut out, including the 45-degree angles, we are going to glue this center piece here together to make that nice bend. Go really slow at this point and make sure that the seam is nice and flush. What helps in this step is to use a heat gun on this piece beforehand, that way it's easier to bend. For this step, we're going to take this piece that we cut out and transfer it to 6mm EVA foam. And after we trace it, we're going to cut out around the lines. We're not actually going to cut the lines so that it's big enough to fit on the under piece of the main piece, as I'm showing you here. And we'll glue that into place. It's okay if the lines don't actually match up when you glue it. We just want to make sure that this piece is big enough. Now it's time to glue both of these pieces onto the main piece. We're gluing around the edges of these pieces, and then glue all the way around the detail pieces on our main piece. Of course, putting glue on both sides of the piece. I found that this part of putting these pieces on was the trickiest. It takes a lot of patience and maybe a little bit of muscle to make sure everything is lined up correctly. So don't be afraid to really wrangle these pieces into place and line them up. For the bottom piece, you want to make sure it lines up flush with the top piece. And also is flush with the details that we created earlier. Next step is to take the end or butt piece and trace that onto some 6mm foam. Again, we'll do this twice. Make sure that one of the pieces is mirrored and that we also trace within this grip. This line right here is also to be cut at 45 degrees. With 6mm foam, it's a little bit easier to do. We're gonna glue the end piece right here, lining it up with the lines we created earlier and over that half dowel to make a nice little hump there. There we go, we're really looking like an assault rifle now. These next sections that we are cutting out are going to be the grips on the front of the assault rifle, and the larger one kind of goes towards the back. So when we're tracing, we're going to cut out 5 of the smaller ones and only 1 of the larger. We're cutting these out of 10mm foam, and on each of the lines, we'll cut this at 45 degrees. Here's one of the grips that is complete. On this template, we can cut out these pieces of the grip and then use this template to mark where the grips can be glued into place. Also use this time to separate the top half of the template from the bottom half. Now we can put this template on our foam and mark where the grips will be glued. This is showing all the markings done and how everything lines up with the grip pieces that we've cut out. Starting with the longer piece towards the middle of the rifle, we can glue that into place, followed by each of the smaller pieces towards the front of the rifle. The next step is to divide this template into the sections that we will glue as details to the top of the rifle. We can divide the template along those lines into these sections here, and then transfer them to 2mm EVA foam. First, we will glue together this front piece just like we did earlier with the 10mm foam. Then we will glue it in place on our main rifle. With this one, you also want to go slowly. Make sure everything lines up, and you might have to stretch this foam a little bit so that it fits on both sides. That's one of the great things about working with foam, you can do that. Then we'll do this again with the other detailed pieces that we cut out. When placing the next pieces on, make sure that there's a little bit of a gap between this piece and the previous piece, and also that it's exactly parallel to the previous piece. The next detail piece we add will be these small hexagons. You can find one of them on the template, just cut out one of them and transfer them 8 times to some 2mm foam. With these, I like to cut them out with scissors. It gives me a little bit more control. And using super glue, place them where the pattern tells you to. Now, as it was once said, this is where the fun begins. It's time to bust out our rotary tool and clean up the assault rifle. We have a couple of goals with this. First is to use them on the sandwich parts to even them out and make them flush with each other. Secondly, we want to use them on every single exposed line on the assault rifle, especially here shown on the 45-degree angles, and really round them out. Spend a little bit more time on those. Otherwise, keep the rotary tool at a medium speed and go really slow and make everything really even. Also use it to clean up any seams like shown here. Don't forget to clean up the sides on the grips. With this step done, you'll notice how much better the rifle looks with everything evened out and the sharp edges taken off. A few more details to add. You want to cut out this switch that's right here. And also this squarish knob thing. I'm not sure what it's called. Trace and cut these out of 6mm foam. Then go ahead and clean them up and round them off with your rotary tool. Then glue them into place. Now it's time to create the lines that are shown on the rifle. To do this, first you want to mark them out with a pen of where you want those lines to go. Just use the template or any other reference materials that you might have and mark them on the rifle. On the end piece, there is a mark that goes down this line, so we'll remove it from the template so we can mark it on the rifle exactly where it goes. The same for this section right here, which is the magazine. We'll cut it out of the template first and then place the template on the rifle to mark exactly where it needs to go. Do this again for the second half of this magazine part. Once everything is marked where you want it, take an X-Acto knife and lightly score the foam where you have marked. You don't want to cut too deep at all, otherwise it might ruin it when we apply the heat gun to it next. For the circle marks, I'm using a rotary tool to extend the sanding bit out a little bit and slowly press down to make this mark. Once all your score marks are done, it's time to take your heat gun and slowly go over every inch of the assault rifle. Not only will that open up the score marks and make it look really cool, it helps seal the foam. It will also clean up any little fuzzies that are left over from cutting or from using the rotary tool. The last detail we'll add is the barrel. For the barrel, I'm using, again, 15mm dowels and use the template to cut them to length. For the underbarrel or flashlight, I'm using a 20mm dowel. That's the biggest I had. But if you want something bigger to actually fit what's on the template, maybe 30mm, you can go ahead and do that as well. The underbarrel has 2 score marks on it, so slightly make those here. Then we can use a drill and drill little holes for the barrel and underbarrel to go. When you put them in, I like to just pressure fit them. I don't really need glue on these, but if you want to put a little bit of super glue in there to hold them in place, you're welcome to do that. And with that, we're done. I hope this build was easy to follow, but if you have any questions about it, feel free to leave a comment below here on YouTube or reach out to me on Instagram at MirrorBrite Cosplay. And if you made your own assault rifle using these instructions, I really want to see it. Feel free to tag us on any photos on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Now, of course, we're not done with this build just yet. We still have to seal and paint the assault rifle, but that's going to be the next video, which will start right